this video, I will review the programming setup process, also talk about an alternative way of output, and finally I will talk about how to use the debugger. The first thing for setting up the program, make sure when you set up the program you go to File, New, Project, deselect these two buttons, make sure you know where your destination is, and then name the project accordingly. Now I already have a project open, so I'm not going to create a project. The project that I have open is this project that we looked at in class, converting the total number of inches to yards, feet, and leftover inches. Notice that I have text boxes here, labels, and one button. The text boxes that I have here are all named with the prefix txt. So I have txt yards, txt feet, accordingly. And I have one button here, and that button is named btn, the prefix btn for button, and then calc. I have not named my labels, nor should you. Now, once I have my interface all set up and all of my text boxes and buttons named properly, I can then get into the coding section. To get into the coding section for the first time, always double click on the button. Do not double click anywhere out here. It will create subroutines that are not needed. Another way after the first time is to simply click on the tab to go from the design view to the coding view. So you can use either one of these methods, double clicking or using the tabs to get from the coding to the interface. Now, notice the program has already been written. We have the constant section, the declaration section. Any variables used down here must be declared up here. Any constants used must be declared. We have then the input section, some calculations in the calculation, and then we have a new form of output. Previously we have used the list box to record all the output. Now we are using text boxes. To do this in the design view, what we did was change the properties of the text box to the read-only true value. By making it read-only true value, we're saying that the user should not put any values in these text boxes. All of the values will come from the program results. So for all of these, notice they're still named txt feet, but the read-only property is set to true. Back in the code, if you can recall, for input, we took information out of a text box which was of type string, converted it to an integer, and stored it in an integer variable. Now we're going to do the opposite. We're going to take integers from the program, convert it back to a string, and store it back out into the text box. So the syntax for that is the output text box.text equals convert to string whatever your numeric value is. So this is how we'll do an alternative way of creating output. Notice when we do that, we have to have labels for all of these boxes now because we're not using the literal yards equals string. Back in the code. Now what I'd like to do is show you how to use the debugger. The debugger is a nice tool that will allow you to stop your program at any point and see the contents of the variables, the inside values stored in the variables. To use the debugger, the first thing you must do is set up breakpoints. You can set up breakpoints by simply clicking out here in the margin, click, and a red dot will appear saying that you now have one breakpoint. You can set up multiple breakpoints throughout the document, but once you set your first breakpoint, you will then use some other navigation tools to get through the program. Now that your breakpoint is set, you can simply run the program the same way you normally run it, hitting F5 or clicking on Start. Once you do that, the program is now executing and you now have your interface up. I'm going to put in 987 total inches. Click on the calculation button, and now we see that the program is halted right there at this statement, the input statement. If I take a look down here, I see that total inches does not have a value yet because this statement hasn't executed. I can also hover my mouse over top of the variable to see its contents. Now, to make the program move on, I could hit one of several buttons on the ribbon. The first one is step into, step over, or step out. For the sake of this class, for the first part of this class, we will always just use step over. Step into and step out of is not pertinent to our uh, assignments yet. So we'll use step over. When I click step over, it takes me to the next statement in the code. Notice the statement total inches input has now been executed and total inches now has 987 in it. If I look at the convert box though, the convert box is 0 because that statement has not yet executed. To execute the next statement, I would simply click step over again. As I click step over, I see that each statement is now executing. Now at this statement, I can see that number of yards now has the value of 27 in it. 27 yards and a total of 987 inches. The question is, how much do I have left over once I get all of those yards converted? I then have a statement here that says take the 987 in the convert bucket, mod it by the number of inches in a yard, and take that remainder and store it right back into the convert bucket. So if you look at the convert bucket right here, it's 987, but once I do another step over, now it's 15. There are 15 inches left over after I figure out how many yards I have. Now, that 15 is in my convert bucket, and you see the number of feet is 0. That's because I haven't converted that 15 inches into inches per foot. So I'm going to execute that next statement, and now I have 1 feet or 1 foot in my variable. And how many inches do I have left over? That statement has not yet executed. Once I execute it, it's going to take the 15, mod it by 12, and give me a remainder of 3. Okay? Now that I've done all the calculations, I'm now ready to dump this information into the text boxes. Now, be careful because the debugger does not like you messing with the output interface box. So when you're in the debugger, when you get to output, just go through all the output before you look at the results, okay? So I'm just going to go step over, and by the way, I could also say continue, but I'll just continue to say step over. Continue is right here. Once I'm done debugging, I can hit continue and run the rest of the code, or I could simply step over all the code. Once I step over all the code, the program is done. My output is in the output box. So this is good